that school might be right for others, but it's not right for my child. And it was in a different district than I worked in. So I was like, I'll take them to my district. People move to my district to put their kids here, and I'm going to put them at a school right by my office. And the first transition, and that's navigating the system too. It's recognizing that you might think you made a good choice because on paper, the school was the school, and it just absolutely wasn't for my child. And so it's swallowing your pride too and saying, we're going to go. And again, I recognize there's a privilege in knowing how to navigate a system, and that I could take him to my district where I worked.
Right.
But the school we might think is right, that school might be right for others, but it's not right for my child. And it was in a different district than I worked in. So I was like, I'll take them to my district. People move to my district to put their kids here, and I'm going to put them at a school right by my office. And the first transition, and that's navigating the system too. It's recognizing that you might think you made a good choice because on paper, the school was the school, and it just absolutely wasn't for my child. And so it's swallowing your pride too and saying, we're going to go. And again, I recognize there's a privilege in knowing how to navigate a system, and that I could take him to my district where I worked.
Right.
But the school we might think is right.
Hi, thank you so much for joining the Falling for Learning podcast. I am TD Blennaw. We have this podcast to help parents and caregivers with having the resources, strategies, and tools needed to make sure that their children are on track for learning and to stay on track for success. Thank you so much for joining the Falling for Learning podcast. We have a special guest here today. It's Dawniell Black. She is the president of the CCSS. That is the California Council for the Social Studies. And we are so honored to have her today so she could talk to us and give parents tips, strategies, all of the things. Thank you so much, Dawniell.
Thank you for having me.
So we always like to start with talking to our guest about what hooked them into learning as a child.
I think what hooked me into learning as a child the most was reading books, having books around all the time. My mom got her GED, so education was just very important to her, making sure that her kids were going to go to college. That was definitely in her mindset. So having books around, and then also having a grandmother who was a kindergarten teacher. So she always had worksheets and everything very early. So the learning was just always an aspect of it, of my growing up.
So you said your mom got her GED, so maybe she didn't finish her education.
So she didn't finish high school initially, and then she went back and got her GED. But because of that, she was just always very focused from the beginning. And I think that's why she very early on introduced books, and that just hooked me into being an avid reader. And then having a grandmother who was a teacher, I do remember one summer that I made the neighborhood kids play school.
Okay.
And so we lived next door to a family that had about 6 kids. And I think it was like 8. And I was like, we're going to play school this summer. And I got the worksheets from my grandmother, and we played school all day.
So like really from an early age, you were an educator. Right. So you're the president of the CCSS, which means at some point you were teaching, right?
Yes.
So tell us about your education career.
So I started I was at a neighborhood school when I started school in kindergarten and first grade. In second grade, I had a teacher in first grade, I had a teacher who recognized that I was gifted. And so I was placed in the gifted and talented education program in second grade. But that meant I had to get on a bus and go to a different school. And what came from that there too is that I was in a neighborhood school that was low income. And so I was being bused into a school where now you had kids who were a little bit more affluent, and we were all in class together. And so that was a different just kind of experience. Sometimes you don't know what you don't have until you see what other people have. So there was this difference. But we stayed together as a cohort 2nd through 6th grade. And then at the time being in GATE, there was a lot of money. So it was the 1980s, but I had access to computers, and I had access to a lot of resources. And so then when I went to middle school, I was still in the GATE program. So again, just recognizing that that is a privilege to have access to kind of the higher level teachers and all of that and all the resources. And so then I did go into an honors program for high school, and I did that for 4 years, and then went to Fresno State, where I got my undergrad degree in public administration and African American studies.
Okay.
Once I left college, I came back. I'm from Sacramento. I came back to Sacramento, and I wasn't too sure what to do with that degree. So I did AmeriCorps. So I volunteered for a year at a middle school and a high school. And that's when I really saw, like, I want to be a teacher. Okay. Even though I think I always knew it existed.
Yes.
It was at that point that I made the decision to do that. And so I took the additional classes at Sac State to get my undergrad, or to get my single subject credential in history, social science. And then I started teaching. And I started teaching in high school. And I was history, social science. So I taught everything for those 10 years. I taught world geography, AP history, world history, all of the things. And then I transitioned, and so I did that for 10 years. And then I transitioned to the district office to be the district administrator for history, social science, and PE. So now I was working directly with teachers, and I've been doing that for the last 10 years.
Wonderful. What a journey. That's good. So what I really hear is getting into a program that recognized your talents, gave you access to resources. And that is something that our parents can think about, maybe thinking about where you have your kid in school and making sure they have access to certain resources. So if it doesn't come naturally because of the program you're in, maybe advocating for it or looking for it, because there are GATE programs or gifted programs as well as magnet programs that are available. So that's something notable because it gave you some access and really helped propel you.
And I would definitely have parents advocate for getting their kids into those programs, because a lot of times they don't see the kids who should be in these programs, but many districts have made a more open process so it's not a teacher kind of tapping, it's a parent can also say, I feel like my child deserves access to these programs as well. And it's out there. So definitely check out your websites to see. Some still do testing. And so one of the things I noticed when I worked in the district office is they would have a test on a Saturday. And a lot of the students who were showing up for those tests were not Black students. But then I wondered, well, how much information are families getting? How is the information being out there? So you can definitely advocate for your child being in these programs. And then also helping your student when they get to high school, challenging them, go ahead and take that AP class.
Right.
Take the honors classes that you don't allow them to stop you from getting your child into those classes if they are not tapping your students.
Okay. I really love what you said, because that's true. It sounds like when you were a kid as well as when I was a kid, a teacher would notice you. And of course, teachers don't notice all the kids that may be gifted or who are eligible for those who would be eligible, right? And so again, our podcast is all about that tip of making sure you could advocate for your child. If you see something in your child that maybe someone else should be noticing and maybe they didn't notice, advocate for it and say, my child should be tested or qualify for this program, and figure out what it takes to get them in. And I really like how you followed up with saying even when they're in high school, they can still take an AP class because maybe they don't get into it or whatever the case is, or maybe you are just listening now and your child is already in middle school or in ninth grade or something, but you could advocate they take an AP class and make sure they get the support they need and, have access to that higher level curriculum and challenge them. Yeah, excellent. Good. So what can you tell us, like some great things that you were doing in your classroom to help hook kids into learning and history and all that when you were in the classroom?
So when I was in the classroom, I definitely I view my students as human beings, and human beings have needs that are just outside of, it's not always the content. So I was definitely the teacher who had the snacks in the drawer, or if a student, needed a break, being very open to communicating with my students to also see them beyond just my content. That U.S. history at the time, or if I was teaching geography, I had a lot of ninth graders, and like recognizing that ninth graders are just coming out of middle school and they still need that help and support.
Yeah.
And I think just very much trying to connect with parents. Let your teachers know if something's going on. I know that as parents, sometimes we don't want to, because I have a ninth grader, but that you don't want to overshare. But if something's going on with your student, letting the teacher know, this is what's going on with my student, to alert them to treat your child gently. Now, I would like all teachers to treat their families gently.
Yes.
But sometimes, if something's going on with your student or with your family that might be coming into the classroom, letting that teacher know so that they don't blow up at the student that day. I mean, because also teachers are human.
Yes.
And so if they kind of know that about your student or something's happening with your family, most teachers are going to want to help. And then you also find out the teachers who don't, which is good information for how and why maybe your child doesn't engage with this teacher in a positive way. So just I communicate with families, and having families communicate with me is just very important.
Right. Yeah, I just want to highlight that. That really makes sense. And as parents, also thinking about that when you're interacting with your child, if something's going on, being sensitive to that. And of course, letting people around them, if they're in sports, if they're, in going to school, and the teachers may not know, so giving them that grace, letting them know. Okay. So what can you tell us about, as a mother, what can you tell us some things that you do to make sure that your child is on track for learning and stays on track for success?
It has been very interesting navigating the educational system as a parent educator. I had a very positive experience going through school. I saw education as this is what saved me. This is what allowed me to build a life for my child.
Mm-hmm.
My young Black son has had a very different experience that I saw starting in kindergarten. So I knew that there was a special school. I was like, I'm going to do everything I can to get him into this school. It has all the accolades. It's one of those where you have those private schools that are in the public.
Right.
And so I knew that, and I did everything I could. I'm going to get him in this school. And that's when I transitioned jobs. So I had a little bit more flexibility. You don't have as much flexibility as a teacher to take a day or to take a couple hours to go volunteer.
Right.
And so I get him in this school. I think I've done the right thing. And then almost immediately in the kindergarten class, I recognized, oh no, this teacher, is she being mean to all the kids? Is she just mean, or is she just mean to my kid? But the reason why I was able to see that is because I did have the flexibility and opportunity to go in the classroom and see it, because that was not what I thought kindergarten was going to be like. I'm a teacher. I love education. And so just the first thing would be that I had privilege being able to go do that.
Yeah.
But if you can tap into family or friends, and if there's a volunteer opportunity in the school to get into the school and see what it's like for your kid, even starting immediately in kindergarten. And so even though I was uncomfortable, I had the opportunity to volunteer a lot. So I was around.
Right.
We stayed for first grade, and I was like, okay, well, this school is the school that everyone sends their kid to. But by second grade, just recognizing that school might be right for others, but it's not right for my child. And it was in a different district than I worked in. So I was like, I'll take him to my district. People move to my district to put their kids here, and I'm going to put him at a school right by my office. And the first transition, and that's navigating the system too. It's recognizing that you might think you made a good choice because on paper, the school was the school, and it just absolutely wasn't for my child. And so it's swallowing your pride too and saying, we're going to go. And again, I recognize there's a privilege in knowing how to navigate a system, and that I could take him to my district where I worked.
Right.
But the school we might think is right. And I also think we left him there too long. But I took him to the new school, and we had a great third grade. And then we had fourth grade came along, and almost immediately I recognized that this teacher, just for whatever reason, didn't like my son. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know if part of it came from me being this Black woman in a district administrator position.
All up in it.
I came in, I told her I work right down the street. I can come in anytime. I can provide whatever support. And I was really excited. And then almost immediately I just recognized that she, and because I was an educator, and I just think this is so important with our kids, that we have the best of intentions and we want to do what's best for them, but we make mistakes. And so even though it was fourth grade, the teacher in me said,
hello, parents. All across the United States, we have students who don't know how to read well and who don't know how to write well. Now, I'm not here to shame you, but I am here to blame you. If your child is behind, it is partially your responsibility and your fault. That next generation needs to be the one that's telling your story, not other people, not other families, not other races or ethnicities. Your family needs to be able to tell your story. And if your child can't write well, who's going to tell your story? I have written 2 books to help address these issues. It is the Rewrite Method, the Parent and Educator Guide for Getting Middle Schoolers to Fall in Love with Writing, and the Rewrite Method Workbook, the Parent and Educator Action Plan for Getting Middle Schoolers to Fall in Love with Writing. This book gives you step-by-step and easy to use and implement activities to make sure that your child not only gets better at writing, but loves to write. Join us for Well Educated Wednesdays every Wednesday on Instagram Live at Falling for Learning. It is a free parent question and answer session where parents can ask questions, learn about resources, strategies, and tips to make sure their children are on track for learning and stay on track for success. That's every Wednesday on Instagram Live at Falling for Learning. We look forward to seeing you and helping the next generation thrive.
Well, sometimes you're going to have a teacher that you don't really like, and this happens. Instead of really recognizing, no, immediately, this teacher is problematic and it's a problem, I was trying to help him navigate a system to say, sometimes you're going to have these encounters, but it's also because I had a high school mentality. Your fourth grade teacher you have to spend every day with shouldn't make you feel like they don't like you. Because that's what he said, well, she doesn't like me. And I was like, well, teachers are like that because that's high school teachers.
50 minutes, yes.
I didn't really get it. And it was not a great experience for him. And part of it was also, too, having him in a district where I worked, is it was coming down to, well, if I start pushing this, what about my job? Mm. And so that was also a recognition to me of the downside of being a parent and an employee in the same school district. Because I felt in the moment I couldn't be both. And so instead of, it got progressively worse. It was just a very terrible year for him. But I then was able, again, because I have access to system. Yes. I know how the system works.
Right.
So then I went and I would move him schools again.
Right.
But this time because I'm in the system, said I want him to go to this school and I want him to have this teacher.
Yeah. And
I was able to do that. But I also will implore you that even if you don't work in the system, you can do that too.
Yes.
You can go.
I just love this.
Go and say, my child is not being successful at this school because of this teacher and this administrator. So he needs to go, or they need to go to another school.
Yes.
And push for that because, and so I put him at this new school where I knew the teacher. So I was like, I feel like there's safety here. And the principal was great. And I was able to share with the teacher, he has educational trauma. He has been traumatized. When Bettina Love said spirit murdering, I said that was what they were trying to do. And so I wanted him in a space that could be loving, that could be healing. And because I knew the teacher and I told her what he went through and we had communication, we were really working on getting him back into connecting to school. And that would be in 2020. So he was only in school for 5 months.
So can we just pause for a moment? You have said so many things that could help, our parents just being able to go and see. So yes, you may not be the great Dawniell Black, right, and have all the resources, but you will have a day off here and there that you could come and see and experience what the classroom is like. And see if that resonates with you. Like some of the kid, that your child might be saying, the teacher doesn't like me, or it's like this, and you'll be able to see some of it. You're not going to see everything. Like if your child is supposed to be acting up, they may not act up while you're there, but you could see what is around and the atmosphere and how the teacher's not really responding to everyone the same way or whatever. And it'll give you an idea. And, moving your child, maybe you think, some people, like I've been in the same school, kindergarten through whatever, and that may or may not work for your child. And just really coming to terms with that is really important. And I did start this podcast because as a middle school teacher, I've heard so many parents when I was like, okay, your kid is a little behind. Here's some things we could do. And they're like, well, that second grade teacher really messed up my kid. And I don't want parents to be victim or their kids victims to the system. So I just love all the things that you said and those tips, about how to make sure your kid is getting what they need. So tell us more, the 2020.
So we were making the turn. His teacher, I brought her to the California Council of Social Studies conference. We were chatting. It was March. The conference happened the weekend before then.
Yes, I went to
everything shut down. And it was so, everybody's all the feelings. So then that interrupted his 5th grade year. And because I had the ability to work from home for 6th grade, I said, you know what? We're doing a digital academy. And we're going to sit side by side every day, and we're going to do homeschool. I'm not going to send you back. Like, as long as I'm home, you're home with me. And so his whole K-6 experience was just so disrupted, and he went through so much that when it came to 7th grade, then I said, I don't want you in my same district anymore. I'm going to put you in a space, in our home district. And again, because I knew a teacher at the school site, I did all the things. It was another one of those magnet type schools, but I did all the things to get him in, went to the parent night, it was a lottery, did all the things. And so having him know that he was transitioning back into school, that there is this person that we personally know. So recognizing and giving him a safe space on campus. And again, recognizing that's a privilege, but as parents, if you can find a space or find somebody on that campus who's gonna, especially at middle school, who's gonna look out for your kid, that connect with a teacher, or maybe it is the custodian, maybe it is somebody who works in the office, but especially for our Black children, finding a safe person on that campus so they know there's someone they can go to if something happens was very important to me.
Yeah.
And I think, as you mentioned, as a middle school teacher, so I taught 9th grade, and watching my son's experience through elementary school informed me as to why I had so many broken kids in 9th grade, because and doing what I can to repair that, but it just shined a light now, helped me understand my 9th grade students because of his experience and seeing where it happens.
Yeah.
But definitely, if you can find somebody on a campus, especially once they get to middle school or high school, that they can connect with or just know someone is there, I think was really important for his middle school experience.
Yeah.
And then going into high school again, I found a program that he could go into, and going to a school where I knew somebody. That's kind of after kind of what I've experienced, like finding someone who he can go to, or just knowing there's a safe space.
Yes.
It's just been really, and I mean, the school has 3,000 students too. So that's knowing that there's an adult that I can go to. I think it's been important. And so 9th grade, we just finished the first semester, halfway through the second, has been an experience for him, but.
Wonderful. And just, again, highlighting, doing all those things. Like, it's true. Sometimes getting into certain schools is jumping through lots of hoops, doing, but it may be worth it. And, and it might not, right? You might do all those things, and it might not, but, really paying attention, like I said, visiting that campus, trying to see who you could, your child could connect to, or you could connect to, or with, taking time to, figure out if this is the right fit, if it's not, and being ready to change if you need to, because it could do a lot of damage to your kid. Yeah, I can relate to that. Yeah. We thank you so much for sharing your story. Even as an educator, people might think, oh yeah, she's got it together. She's a teacher. She's an administrator. She does all these things. And it still may not be the connection with our child. Because they're not us, right? They're not going to have the same experience, no space and time. So what are some mistakes that you've made as a parent? Well, you said a couple of them. But this is always what I would like to talk to you about too, is like some missteps that you took that you maybe had to reset or help reframe for your kid that may have been your fault, more not, some of that was the other people's fault. So just thinking how parents could reset situations with their kids, because sometimes things go awry.
Well, as I mentioned with the experience, even when it got down to his fourth grade experience, where it got down to where he was like the stomach upsets, and not pushing them aside, but not recognizing them as like he is so anxious to be in this woman's class that he is physically pained.
Right.
And it's hard for us as parents, especially if you're kind of like a high performing kid. I never missed school, and he's wanting to miss school, and I was thinking, no, you're fine. And he really wasn't. And then also in that situation, I could have taken action earlier. And by the time that I did, a lot of damage had been done. Okay. But when I did finally call the conference to talk, to say, this is not working. So he did end up moving classes, and I feel like I knew it wasn't right early, and I should have moved him out of that class at the time. So that was one experience. And how I've reset that, though, is in middle school when he did transition back, I had to let go of what I think of as, no, you go to school every day. There's not a reason to miss school. But then remembering he stayed at home for all of sixth grade. So when he came to me and he's like, I can't go today. I can't do it. And being willing to say, okay, I understand. So that's that teacher hat that's like, no, you go to school every day. Yes. And then also being Black parents, no, they're going to starve me if you miss school.
Yes.
But saying, do you know what, though? If this is what you need, I have to let those pieces go.
Yes.
And so I think that that's really what came out of like a transition too. Again, being a high performing student, never wanting to miss school. And I loved school, and I just recognized he doesn't love school.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean he can't love learning.
Yes.
And so what spaces and how do I help him understand the function of school?
Right.
But also recognizing your school experience hasn't been the best. So why would you love school? But how can we still make sure you love learning?
Yeah. So much right there that you were saying. Yeah. Wow. Because I can be rigid too. Like some of us as parents, we could listen. We want it to be this way. It should be this way. But recognizing and really helping, recognizing their needs may be different, right? Because we might be just like that. I definitely can relate. But our kids aren't that way, and just trying to give them some space, right? Not to just be rigid in what our experience is and how we are. And that's hard. It's hard. Like, and other people might have that judgment, like, oh, your child didn't come. Like, I know what I'm doing. Yes, I'm not doing this. That's a lot. It's a lot. So, any final things like that you want to tell parents as they're trying to navigate the system, or they may have some setbacks in their child's learning journey? So, any final things you want to say?
I have sometimes grappled with not wanting to be that parent. So not wanting to be the one that's pushing or that's calling all the time. Be that parent because that is your child.
Yes.
And be that advocate. Don't feel like, well, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to be that parent. Be that parent because your child needs you to be that advocate for them. And so don't ever feel like you can't push for something or say something or do something because you don't want to be perceived as a certain way.
Right.
Because, and when I think of the mistakes, it's because I didn't want to be that parent. And the only person who suffered was my child.
Oh my goodness.
So be that parent.
Be that parent. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for joining us, Dawniell Black. We appreciate you so much. Thank you for joining the Falling for Learning podcast, and have a great week. Thanks again for supporting the Falling for Learning podcast. New episodes go live every Saturday at 5 p.m. You can watch us on youtube.com at Falling for Learning, or listen on all major podcast platforms such as Apple, Google, Audible, Spotify, and much more. For more resources, visit fallinginlovewithlearning.com. We really appreciate you. Have a wonderful week.